Hey guys, welcome to the channel. It's been a hot second since I did my last review, and the last review that I did, interestingly, was the Tudor Ranger. And Tudor, as you guys have been aware of, they've been just releasing a lot of really cool and really interesting models in the past year in 2022. That includes the Tudor Pelagos 39, which has been super popular, the Tudor Ranger, and of course this Tudor Black Bay Pro that we have in front of us to take a look at today. And this watch is very heavily based off of the Rolex Explorer 2, reference 1655, also known as the Steve McQueen. And that model was kind of an ugly duckling in Rolex's lineup. It wasn't super popular, and it wasn't a hot seller when it first came out. It kind of came into its own and developed a cult following over the years. So it's very interesting that Tudor went with this design choice to bring the Rolex Explorer 1655 elements into their Black Bay line. And I'm very glad that they did, because the 1655, that's one of my favorite Rolex vintage models. I think it's really, really cool looking with the 24-hour bezel, the stainless steel bezel, and then the orange 24-hour hand. You can see a lot of those elements echoed in this model. And as you guys know, Tudor is Rolex's sister brand. They bring a lot of their nostalgic and vintage aesthetics into their lineup. And I'm glad that they do, because I've also owned and reviewed the Rolex Explorer 2 226570 model, the 42 millimeter. That is a very different watch from what the Rolex Explorer 2 used to be when it first came out. So first and foremost, let's take a look at the dimensions of the Tudor Black Bay Pro. The diameter is 39 millimeters, and that's a great case size. That'll look really great on most wrists, and the Black Bay 58 also shares the same case diameter, and it just wears very, very well. The wingspan is 47.6, or the lug distance, and if you include the slight protrusion of the end links, it's 51.2 objectively across the span of your wrist. Now, the most controversial dimension of this watch is obviously the thickness. Including the domed sapphire crystal, this watch is 14.8 millimeters thick, which at just slightly under 15 millimeters is definitely on the thicker side. You will notice a little bit of the overhang on your wrist, but I feel that that thickness is exemplified a little bit more. It's a little bit more exaggerated due to the slab-sided case of this watch. If Tudor did something to kind of make the case look a little bit sleeker, kind of like Omega does with, their Planet Oceans and their Speedmasters, I think it could really cut down the visual appearance of how thick the case is. But because the watch has the 39 millimeter more compact diameter, I found that this watch wears a lot more comfortably versus the Tudor Black Bay GMT, the Pepsi model that I actually previously owned as well. And then the clasp actually features Tudor's T-Fit system. So it actually gives you some really great on-the-fly adjustability. For those of us who don't like to have our heavier watches kind of sling around on our wrists, this T-Fit clasp is a game changer in that it allows us to get the custom fit that we want. So those different elements kind of come together to make this watch a little bit more wearable, even though it is objectively a thicker watch. Now, the lug width on this watch is 20 millimeters, and it tapers down to 16 at the clasp. You can see that it has these faux rivets on either side, and they're fixed by screws, so it's very easy to pop out a link. They are faux rivets, so they're not the most popular right now amongst the watch community, but I'm in that camp where I think it actually looks pretty good with these older vintage inspired watches. I think it actually looks, it fits the watch. This watch is based on a 1970s design. The Black Bay 58 was based off of a watch from the 50s. And so in my defense, I actually think that the rivets fit pretty appropriately with the era of the watch that these watches are inspired by. But that's just my take on it. Now let's talk about some of the design elements of this watch. You see there's a big crown here on the right side of the case. Very easy to manipulate and maneuver and, wind the watch in the first position, set the hour hand in the second position, and then of course hack the movement at the third position and set the minutes hand and the GMT hand. You can see that 24-hour bezel, which I love. It looks just like the Rolex reference 1655. like almost identical to it with that stainless steel brushed bezel and the engraved sort of black lacquer 24-hour markings denoting whether you're an AM or PM. And, the original intent for the 1655 was to show show cave explorers if they were, if it was morning or night, because they were in caves and they couldn't see it all. It was pitch black. So that's kind of the functionality of what that 24-hour hand was intended for initially. But now, with this watch being a GMT type of watch, that 24-hour hand has become more of a reference time. It can be a 24-hour hand, but it can also be, your home time zone. To me, that 24-hour hand, it looks a little bit more orange, but I think that's just wishful thinking since I love the Rolex Explorer 1655. But I think the official judgment is that it's more of a yellowish color, but I'd like to think that it's a yellow-orangish color, and obviously a play on that Rolex Explorer 1655. Now you can see that the dial is sort of an off black color and has a little bit of texture on it as well. It has a bit of a matte effect to it. The lume is sort of this aged color, this creamy color, and I think it's done pretty tastefully. You wouldn't want this watch to look too sterile or austere because it is based off of an older model. Domed sapphire crystal and has a nice distortion plexiglass effect to it. Does add a little bit to the thickness, but I think is very appropriate for the design of this watch. The lume on this watch is spectacular. It's a variation of Superluminova and lasts many, many hours throughout the night. I'm a huge lume junkie. I'm the weird watch enthusiast who actually wears his watches to bed. So for me, having great lume is a must. So great lume, great design, and overall just a very tight package. Now let's very briefly talk about the movement inside this watch, because if you are familiar with the Tudor GMT, Black Bay GMT, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are, there's not going to be a whole lot of news here. It's the same caliber powering that watch, MT 5652, which is a Tudor in-house manufactured caliber. 70 hours of power reserve, hacking, hand winding, true GMT function. This movement has served me really well. It's COSC certified. So -4 to +6 seconds per day. In my experience, this watch has only been off by a couple of seconds, give or take, each day. So it's actually performed better in the real world than the stated specifications. But for me, the biggest gripes I had about the Tudor Black Bay GMT was the fact that I actually experienced that date wheel issue where my date wheel was actually getting stuck in between positions. And so I am super glad to report that Tudor have fixed that date wheel issue with the Tudor Black Bay Pro with their caliber 5652, because it is very snappy and reliable now. Now, how does this watch wear? It wears very well on my wrist. My wrists are about 6.5 inches in circumference, and it's super comfortable. The 39mm case diameter really helps. The thickness does not help. It does have the 20mm lug width, whereas the Tudor Black Bay GMT had 22mm lug width. So as a whole, it's a lot more wearable, at least compared to the Tudor GMT. And this is the type of watch that I feel like is a very good daily watch. It's very low key. It's rugged. It's not the dressiest piece, so it's not the most versatile, but for all intents and purposes, day to day, I think this is a very nice looking watch that isn't too flashy. I'm personally a little bit more hesitant traveling with my Batman, especially to areas that I'm unfamiliar with. This watch, I don't even think twice about. I put it on. It's kind of become sort of my beater watch in a way, because it is just so dang rugged. It's got the sapphire crystal, the brushed bezel. It does get kind of scratched up, but whatever. It actually adds to the character of the watch. And so for all those reasons, I think that this watch really is a great daily driver. I actually wear this watch when I go and play basketball and when I do sports and things like that, because it really is just that rugged. Just the fact that this watch retails for under $5,000, which is still a lot of money, but in the grand schemes of the luxury watch world, I wouldn't lose as much sleep if something happened to this piece as, say, my Batman or my Submariner. I think I've pretty much already touched on some of the, room for improvements. Some of it's subjective, like the faux rivets. I think a lot of watch fans would like to see Tudor do away with that, like they did with the Tudor Ranger. What's not subjective, obviously, is the thickness. With the next iteration, if Tudor could bring down the thickness to, let's just say, under 14 millimeters for starters, bringing in a new movement that can allow the case to shrink accordingly, or just offering a 100-meter water-resistant watch. I don't think that'll happen. I think the Black Bay range is really kind of meant to be like 150 meters plus. For me personally, it would have been really cool if Tudor did an orange hand instead of the yellowish hand, because that deep orange, it just looks so good on the Rolex Explorer 2 1655 and later in the 216570s and 226570s. I think that shade of orange would have looked really good on this watch. But other than that, I really don't have any other complaints. It's really a dang good watch, especially for its price. And I look forward to having many more adventures with this. I've had Rolex Explorer 1s. I had the 39mm, the 36mm, the 42mm Explorer 2. And I finally kind of settled on this model. I think it really is a great offering. That's coming from someone who's had plenty of adventures with other Explorers. You have my word. This is really a solid watch, and it's not like a watered down Explorer 2 or, quote unquote, the poor man's Rolex or anything like that. I really think that this is a solid piece for everything that it is. So anyways, guys, hopefully you found this review to be informative, helpful, entertaining, interesting. If you have any comments or questions, don't hesitate to drop them in the comment section below. Your feedback is really important to me, and first and foremost, I just love, interacting with you guys, seeing the different comments that you guys have. Even the haters, even people who leave negative comments, I'm like, that's interesting. So anyways, guys, thank you for your support. Thank you for your viewership. I hope to hear from you guys soon, and I hope to provide some content in the coming year as well. And I'll catch you guys soon. Take care.